Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Yana Johnson, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Commander Philip Andrews. We warmly welcome the family of Private Frederick Singleton Martin, whose story will be told shortly. We are honoured to welcome Mr. Brian Cairns, Chief Operations Officer, Victorian Branch of the Returned and Services Leagues of Australia, and the accompanying delegation, including RSL Victoria Sub-Branch General Managers who are attending this evening's ceremony. We welcome the veterans that have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family, visitors, and students from St Bede's College, Mentone, Victoria. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was a vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which he remained true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they love, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Frederick Singleton Martin. Known as Fred to his friends and family, Frederick Martin was the youngest of 12 children born to James and Mary Martin. Frederick was born in 1893 in Singleton, New South Wales, and he grew up in Orange, attending Orange Public School. As a young man, he joined the Orange Rifle Club and was a member of the Senior Cadets. Martin enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force at Dubbo in September 1915. After an initial period of training in Australia, he embarked from Sydney in June 1916 on board the transport ship Kiara. Disembarking in August at Plymouth, England, Martin went to Larkhill Camp in the Salisbury Plain. He trained there until November 16. Among other aspects of basic training, he learned how to use a Lewis light machine gun in a team of 3 men. Martin joined the 33rd Australian Infantry Battalion, the majority of whose men came from northern New South Wales, like himself. Sailing for France in November 1916, Martin and the men of the 33rd Battalion suffered the effects of the harsh winter of 1916 and 1917 in the Ypres sector of the border of Belgium and France. As the weather warmed up, the British and Commonwealth forces began to push into Belgium, and the men of the 33rd Battalion entered their first major battle of Mézines in Belgium. They successfully captured their objectives in the battle, but were then subjected to heavy German artillery bombardment lasting several days. In October 1917, British commanders attempted to push the German forces out of Flanders with a series of major attacks. The 33rd Battalion took part in one of these, the disastrous Battle of Poissondale. This battle took place after a heavy rain, and the battlefield had become impossibly muddy. Soldiers, supplies and artillery became bogged down, and the Australians suffered heavy casualties. In January 1918, Martin had a fortnight's leave in England before returning in February to Courtepy camp in Belgium on the French border. Here the 33rd Battalion was engaged in training and camp maintenance. The unit also spent a fortnight at the front repairing the posts and trenches under German artillery fire. At the end of the march, Martin and his unit travelled by train south to the French village of Cachy, near the town of Villers-Bretonneux. At this time, the Germans were preparing what would be their final large-scale attack of the war, which became known as the German Spring Offensive. One of the major thrusts in this offensive was on the Somme sector of the Western Front. On the 30th of March 1918, the men of the 33rd Battalion marched from their camp at Cachy to Hangard Wood south of the Somme River. At 5 p.m, the Australians launched an attack on the German lines. With 2 other soldiers, Privates Neville Wilkinson and Ralph Hope, Martin was manning a Lewis light machine gun during this attack. The position was spotted by the German machine gun crew, which fired upon each man as he took up the gun. The 3 Australian soldiers were killed in quick succession. Martin was buried in the vicinity of Hangard Wood. He was 25 years old. Frederick Martin's name is engraved on the Australian National Memorial at Villers-Bretonneux, along with the names of nearly 11,000 Australians who died on the Western Front and who have no known grave. Private Frederick Singleton Martin is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his name, listed on the Australian National Memorial as Villers-Bretonneux, is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Frederick Singleton Martin, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor will the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We'll leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere, or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they'll be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and we wish you all a very good evening.